go ahead and I'm gonna give you a code. You wanna place white or black?
Up to you.
You wanna go on the standard board?
I've never played a game where I haven't been teaching someone who doesn't know how to play already.
Right.
So.
No, I mean you do know how to play though, right?
I know how to play. I can beat the computer, but
yeah, that's
good
enough.
New,
that is good
thing.
enough. Right, I give you the code on Discord. So just let me know when you're in. I put you as white here, and we're gonna try and figure this out together.
I do like E4 against the computer at least, and I do like E5 as black.
That is a good.
I don't know if that's
I don't think
that I'm particularly aggressive.
I don't think E5 as black is the same as E4 as white. But it's certainly a good approach in usual, trying to go aggressive at the start. But yeah, I mean, I'm just waiting till we see it on the board. So make sure.
Assuming I haven't messed this up, I'm here.
Alright, very good. Okay, so we're into the game. Again, just for my stream. Well, what we're doing right now is I'm in a call with Supware, who's been a regular supporter on the series on YouTube as well as on Twitch, and we're gonna do some one-on-one teaching, coaching, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I hope we can all learn something from this maybe, and in particular. Try and go for something else related to content in this game. Alright, so just go ahead and make your first move. Alright, so you said you like E4. Of course you already played this. Why do you like E4 in this game?
I feel like it just leads to a quicker attack of at least sharpness quicker.
Right.
And I like sharp games where you've got to calculate in normal chess as well.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I tend to agree, at least on the first 2 points. Is just like in regular chess, E4 is like one of the, if not the best opening that white has, because it grabs the most space. When it comes to pawn moves, what you want to consider in particular is how it actually frees up your pieces. Because from the starting position, the only 2 pieces that can develop are the knights, because they can jump over the pawns. So every pawn move you make of the opening should aim to develop your bishop and perhaps your queen in some lines. E4 does a good job and a better job of developing your pieces compared to something like E3 or D3, as it does not block in your other bishop. For example, if you went E3 instead, your dark squared bishop would be blocked in. So I tend to like this. I tend to like this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make a move here. Let's go for this. Well, one of the drawbacks, as you've surely noticed, is that in this game, opening up any kind of space near the king can be an issue.
Yeah. So you say E6 is good for black, but you prefer E4 to E3 as white.
Playing as black is a little bit of a different beast. Usually, the reason why white is better in the starting position is mostly related to the fact that he's more freedom to try and go on the aggressive, and black is gonna have to make some sacrifices to not lose immediately. That is usually how the balance shapes up in this game. The same way in classical, where the French being E4 E6 is a good opening, is because black can try and go for a pawn break later to then free up his light squared bishop on c8. But in general, you're correct. It is not the same simply because white just does have an inherent advantage.
Yeah, sure. And you're blocking this c4 f7 diagonal.
Yes, there's one of the many purposes to test here. I mean, first of all, it's putting a pawn in the center to free up the dark squared bishop as well as the queen. And in this game in particular, e6 is a decent idea to block this diagonal, like you said, with bishop c4. Whatever you do later, I then don't have to react to actually block the diagonal.
So I have no idea what the next move should be for white.
You're gonna tell me. You're gonna tell me. What could be? What are the principles you're looking to get out of an opening?
I feel like I need to develop a minor piece, but is that bishop d3, bishop c4, knight f3, knight c3?
Yeah, those
I
are
want to
those are
develop a
all,
minor piece, definitely.
yeah, those are all pretty good. So, generally, what you want to get out of the opening in this game as well as in classical chess is develop your pieces, get space in the center, and make sure your king's safe. Like especially his king safety is a little bit more difficult in this game, but the other stuff still applies.
Sure.
So in classical chess, a normal move would be d4 here to just grab space in
Classical
the
chess,
center.
I would always play d4 in this position.
Exactly, that is very good.
But I don't want to open up this dark square diagonal to my king.
Exactly, also correct. So, what does this leave you with? This leaves you with more or less minor piece development if you don't want to push another pawn immediately. So,
I'll just make a kind of waiting move, I guess.
yeah, I mean, it's not a
you
waiting
go?
move. You are developing a piece, and I like this move in particular because it highlights some of Black's weak squares in the center, which are in particular e5 and d4. As I'm currently we're both contesting f5 and d5 here with these pawn moves, which is where the pawns are looking at. So developing a knight to f3, who's looking at some of the weaker squares here. And maybe in some lines also on g5 seems like a good idea. You're developing a piece. You're removing one of the two pieces that has to move before you actually get to castle. So I would say this is a good move. I would say this is a good move for sure. So, and to react to this, I'm gonna do the same, mostly to also develop a piece, as well as look at the two weak squares that you just attacked with your knight.
I don't know why, but I really want to move my light square bishop somewhere.
Seems like a good idea to me. Again,
either that or just knight c3.
Yeah, you're in no rush to push more pawns currently. With the bishop, you have to make a little bit of a decision. You mentioned earlier that you like moving your bishop out, and you were looking at some of the squares like b5, c5, d3, e2 would be the normal ones, obviously. Out of these, I feel like most of them are sensible. d3 probably not as much because you're blocking your d pawn, which might hinder you later to develop your dark squared bishop.
So I generally want to castle before moving my d pawn, maybe.
That depends. I mean, there's a lot of ways to achieve a safe castling position, if that's what you're going for. Anyway, like in this game, you sort of have a choice if you even want to castle or not.
Yeah.
But you could also, like, if we're talking about moving your d pawn, there's some other ways to achieve this. In this position in particular, it's actually not that difficult for you to do this. Mainly because I already played knight c6. And the quickest way to get on the diagonal that would be weak on the king would be with the queen, where like playing something like c7, and even then you probably have time to do this. Mostly in this game,
there's no point checking me with the bishop because I can just push a pawn or something.
Exactly. Since the bishop only has the diagonal movement, the bishop doesn't have the unicorn check the same way the queen does. So I feel like you could probably get away with playing d4 here. You might still want to follow up with c3 or maybe play c3 first to prepare this, if that's the structure you want. You could also just develop your other knight or make a bishop move. I think well, there's a lot of options here, and most of them seem pretty sensible.
The main reason I'd play c3 is to get my queen out, but she's not doing anything up there now that the knights come out or anything.
c3 is also a very useful move to support the center later. Like if you play c3 now, if you play c3, there's more or less intending that you want to go for a d4 structure.
And then I'd end up going maybe knight d2 to c4 later.
Exactly. For example, you probably want to develop your dark squared bishop before that, but that could be a plan for sure. But yeah, c3 works best with a d4 structure. Maybe you can even push e5 later, and then you have sort of this pawn chain from e5 to b2 all the way, which is usually a very strong asset in classical as well as in this game for this matter. So yeah, at the end of the day, it comes down to personal preference as well. I certainly don't mind pretty much all of the moves you set here, except like bishop d3 I don't like. Bishop c4 I also don't really like because black already played e6, so you're more or less just biting on this pawn. Black doesn't want, like, maybe it prevents d5 in some lines, but I think I would prefer like a bishop b5 or like bishop bishop e2 maybe if you want to play conservative, or you could go for the strong center with d4, maybe preparing with c6, or develop your knight to c3. I think all of these are sensible moves.
We'll go for this one to see what happens.
Yeah, like I said, I like this idea. What you have to keep in mind is that you're more or less saying that you want to play d4 next.
No, so, just like in 2D chess.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking at this for a moment. I obviously still have to develop myself. In the French, normally Black would probably play d5 here now to try and contest the center. But for the purpose of keeping this interesting, also I'm not entirely sure how good this move would be here. I'm gonna play something else, and I'm gonna play knight here instead. And I'm gonna explain you why.
E5 looked a little bit scary, I think.
E5 certainly looks scary.
Because whoever opens the E file is in a lot of danger, it seems. Whoever moves the pawn off the E file last.
Yeah, so if I played d5 instead, what would you have done probably?
I'm just thinking if d5 e takes, whoever gets a bishop or a queen on the E file first is.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. I'm gonna stop you right there. If I played d5 and you took back with the e-pawn, I would recapture with the queen. And the main reason is that I don't open my e-file in that line. It's gonna be so imagine if the knight was still on g8. We would have a position where you captured and I captured with the queen. Meaning my pawn is still on e6.
Taking d5 with the queen?
d5 yeah, pawn takes, queen takes. Let me know if I'm talking a little bit too quickly.
I think I'm confused. Why can the queen take d5?
In the line where instead of going knight f6, you were worried about that I played d5, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and you said.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so
I've got you. Yeah.
Okay, you got me right. So in that line, white probably doesn't want to take on d5, but you have some other options there. The best reason to the best way to avoid a pawn break in the center is probably to push or to cover if you want to keep the tension. But yeah, those are all options. But I want to try to highlight a little bit of a different idea Black can go for here. So I went for the knight move, and now you have a question to ask yourself: how you want to defend e4.
I have another question, and that's whether or not I want to defend e4, but I suppose that's a bit more advanced than I should be thinking for now. These gambit ideas.
You're asking if you wanna give the pawn. Well, I mean that's the same question you should always ask yourself in these gambit lines, right? Like if you give a pawn, you have to have some compensation, right?
And there's basically none, because I can't kick the knight away with a pawn even. It doesn't develop anything.
Exactly. That's exactly right. If you're gonna gambit a pawn, you're mostly gonna do so to get development, to get a development advantage. Is how most gambits in classical work, and probably the same way in this game. I feel like in this game, gambits can be more viable simply because counterplay can arise quicker. But in this position, I'm not a particular fan, because you would have to make a move that has an immediate threat or some active idea. I don't currently see it. Keep in mind this is still a very early position. Black is 2 pieces developed, white is 1 piece developed, but white is an advantage in the center. So I would say this is still a very normal position at the moment.
I think I should push e5.
Okay, there's one way of defending the pawn for sure. What are some other options you have, though? I think it's a good move, by the way.
In this position, I'm a little bit scared of knight g4 and then convergence with the bishop on f2.
Mm-hmm. So after...
do I have, though? Like, what else can I defend that pawn with? I have no knight c3.
Exactly, because you blocked it with c3.
And again, because of c3, I don't want to play d3 because that blocks in the bishop, and obviously I want d4.
Correct.
Queen c2 defends? in a way that doesn't inhibit the other pieces.
Yeah, that's very true. Queen c2 is probably the first move I would be looking at as well. The reason why I don't like e5 here as much, it's probably still an okay move. Because after
it just defends like d5 and f5, as you said earlier, which are more important than kicking knight away.
Yeah, like if you play e5, Black has to make a decision where he wants to move his knight, because it's probably too early to sacrifice this. If you go e5, you have to keep in mind that there's a possibility of knight g4, which is gonna be hitting f2 as well as e5. I think in this line,
I feel like you could just sack the knight in that line.
I mean, that's kind of the question you ask yourself. Like in this position, I think it's okay because after e5, knight goes to g4, and then you can follow up with d4. And I feel like your center is strong enough, and you have enough control on the dark squares that a sacrifice on f2 is not that scary for you. Is one idea.
Right, it's too early for me to...
Exactly, but you have to see this in advance. So if you want to keep it simple, I feel like queen c2 is a good move to cover the pawn without inhibiting your development ideas. You don't want to play d3 because that's a little bit passive and it blocks on your bishop. And this is a pretty normal developing move. Another option might have been go queen a4 maybe. But the queen looks more natural on the c2 square, especially as some long-term adays as well, where you push d4 and then maybe e5 for the pawn chain, and the queen's already looking at h7 in the position where black maybe castles later. But these are more long-term ideas. Another reason why the queen's pretty safe on c2 is that you already played c3, so there's no knight d4 or knight b4 in any of these lines. So yeah, I quite like this move.
It does look a lot safer than e5, which is the only other move I'd think about.
Yeah, that's very true. I think both would have been okay here. I think both would have been okay here.
So you're just going to fianchetto to unattack the pawn again.
Exactly. That's more or less the idea.
So now I want to play d4 followed by maybe knight d2 to defend the pawn.
That could be an idea. I think d4 is a good move here. Maybe not knight d2 immediately because your bishop is still blocked then. And I don't want to take it. I just want to keep the tension then. And you're gonna have to ask yourself a question how you want to develop your bishop. Usually you want to develop your bishop before you get the pawn chain.
I'm just going to play d4 because it feels right, and then think about the plan.
I would tend to agree here. I think d4 is probably the best white has, no matter what. Also, also another reason why black might prefer fianchetto here is because his pawns are already blocking the light squared bishop, which is like in the French as well as in the French.
Yeah, just like the normal French.
Exactly, and the carrow sometimes as well. You sometimes get this bad bishop on c8, and a good way to develop this is just going for the fianchetto, which is probably what I'll end up doing here. Still playing fairly normal chess here, but again, like most of the normal principles still apply.
Just waiting for the first branch. I kind of want to pin your knight to your queen now. I'm not sure why.
With
bishop g5.
Bishop b5. I mean, it doesn't pin the knights immediately because the pawn's still blocking, but it could be an idea for sure. I like b4. I like
g5. Sorry, not b5.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Sorry, I think I just misheard you. Yeah, that looks like a normal move. That looks like a normal move to make here. This also indirectly covers e4 because the knight can't move there anymore because the queen's pinned. So I quite like that move. I like that move a lot.
Until you push with the pawns, because I don't know if you want to castle kingside or queenside yet. So if you play h6 and g5, and I'm gonna go bishop g3. I feel like you've maybe accomplished more with the pawn storm than I have with moving the bishop 3 times.
I think g5 is definitely the natural square for the bishop.
Well, let's do that then.
It also comes with some added threats later maybe. Like if black's not careful here, you might get to play e5, which then attacks the knight again, and the knight still can't move because the queen's hit. So I definitely have to react to this. And since you developed the piece while making a threat, I think it's a good move.
But to e5 or any threats that I make, you can just play h6, I suppose, just as in normal chess.
That is true, but it might be too slow in this game. Simply because
Okay.
you got a lot of pawns near my king. I certainly can't ever castle in that position. But yeah, I certainly see your concern. Why this would be true. But even then, you can drop the bishop back, and the knight doesn't really want to move. Like after e5, like say black doesn't nothing move here, like a6, and then goes. And then you go e5. If black then plays h6, the bishop can always just drop back to h4. And then to not lose the piece, he would have to push g5 as well. So it already make 2 moves, and even then you can drop it back again and the knight is still hit.
Well, I'll submit and just see what happens, I suppose.
Exactly. So I feel like my intuition tells me black has to react to this somehow. To make sure they're not going blown up. There's certainly no time to play d5 here because the e5's coming. And I still feel like I could play h6 immediately, but again, I'm not entirely sure because as soon as I play h6, I'm more or less saying that I never castle in this position. So I think the normal way to defend this is just going bishop e7 to cover this. If black goes e5, it then opens up d5 for the knight. There's maybe some deflection tactics later on e4. I think this is the natural move. I think this is the natural move black has here.
But if the bishop ever lands on e4, it's going to be check and I'll lose a queen.
That is true. There's something you certainly have to be careful about. So
I really like knight d2 now. Knight b d2.
I would say you're absolutely correct. Knight d2 first of all develops another piece. You already got your bishop out, and it shuts down any tactic of let's say like knight b4, and then after pawn takes, bishop takes, e4 is check.
Yeah.
And then the queen is to take. So I think this is probably the best move for a test here. Develops another piece, keeps the aggression going. Keep in mind you have a huge advantage in the center already. You're almost complete development.
Because I'm white.
Yeah, exactly. I think white's doing very well here in this position. In general. So yeah, knight d2 looks like the natural move, and it's probably the best one you have here for sure. Because otherwise, again, there would be maybe some tricks with knight b4. After pawn takes, bishop takes here with check. You have to give up the queen. But as it stands now, you're still protecting this nicely. It also means there's no knight takes e4 now. Like after knight takes e4, bishop takes bishop, queen takes, and then the knight's hanging. In some other lines, it's sometimes not as clear, where you might not have time to take the bishop. But here this certainly looks good. And now black's in a little bit of an awkward spot because he still isn't sure where he actually wants to put his king. He is still worse in the center, and couldn't even castle long if he wanted to because the queen's still blocking. So I think now is the time where black probably needs to come up with an idea how to continue. So what are your thoughts of what black could do here? You also, of course, always have to check what your opponent could be doing.
I mean, at this point, I've just sort of only just remembered that we can travel back in time. In the present, though, as black, I think I want to move my queen somehow, so I've got more flexibility in which way I can castle if I feel like I need to.
Okay, so how would you achieve that though? Because like right now the queen obviously doesn't have any moves. She can only go to c8 or b8, both of which don't really look great, right?
d5 looks possible now.
Yeah, I was probably looking at d5 as well. Either d5 or d6, going for maybe a little bit of a more conservative option. D5 certainly is more active, but what would be white's normal reply to d5?
Probably e5, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or take the knight first and then e5.
Yeah, for sure. Just making sure you don't run this tension. D5 does however have the drawback of blocking in the bishop on b7. So it's not particular something black would love here. Instead, I think black should look at how to perhaps develop some how to perhaps accelerate his development, and maybe trade off a couple of pieces. So I think what I'll end up doing is not d5 because I don't want to block my bishop in long term, and look for maybe a reply to perhaps start trading some pieces. And I think the best way to maybe achieve this is going knight here. So so to maybe put some pressure and ask White where he wants to put his bishop. So that's what I'm gonna play.
My first instinct is to avoid trading now.
Why is that?
I guess that loses some initiative, maybe? Mm-hmm. I also can't castle now because of a fork.
Mm-hmm. But you also can't castle because the bishop's hanging.
I mean, that's true. But like, even after I trade bishops, I've got to do something else before I castle.
Exactly. So if you don't wanna trade here, you have to move the bishop. But I think you only have,
which means losing a tempo.
Exactly. Right. So it's a trade-off.
Maybe I have to.
I'm gonna ask. I'm kind of asking an awkward question here because you have to make a decision. If you take my bishop, I'm gonna take back with the queen, and then I can decide which direction I wanna castle. But if you don't,
you've got a lot of control over the dark squares.
Exactly. But if you don't wanna trade, you don't have great options either. Because I think the only sensible move is f4 really. Bishop f4, sorry. Or like maybe h4. But I'm gonna let you figure this one out and then decide later.
With h4, I feel like the bishop's gonna get kicked by a pawn or something as well.
h6 probably.
Yeah.
That's another question you maybe want to ask yourself when considering the capture. Would you prefer a situation where you played h4, h6, and the bishops are traded, or would you prefer a situation where the bishop's traded and the queen just takes back, with the pawn still being on h and h2 and h7?
I think I should just cut my losses with this.
I would probably, like, between the two options we just went over, I think this is probably the better one.
Otherwise, I'm just losing tempo.
Exactly.
Somewhere.
Plus with the inclusion of h4, h6 in this position, h4 is not really taking away a square from me. Whereas h6
h4 doesn't do anything in that position.
Exactly. Whereas h6 cuts away a square from your knight as well on f3. I mean, like, in regular chess, there obviously could be the argument to be made for in short castle positions you already have a flight square for later. But yeah, as it stands now, I feel like this is probably the normal move anyway. I'm gonna take back with the queen.
Right. Even so, you've got an extra tempo managing to get your knight all the way to g4.
Exactly. I mean, the knight's not perfectly placed on g4, but it's more or less.
Do play h3?
So you wanna kick the knight. That's certainly playable. I'm just looking at some. So what are your alternatives? Or like what are you worried about?
I'd also like to develop the light square bishop. I just want to kick the knight away from attacking f2 so that I can maybe go queenside castle.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But developing the light square bishop just seems like the right thing to do here. I don't think knight takes f7, f2, sorry, is dangerous yet. Because my knight's defending h4.
I do like the idea of like I like your thinking of going h3 to then free up the square from f2 if you want to castle long in this position. I think White can still castle in both directions here, but there's certainly something to be said about this.
It looks like both players can castle in both directions.
Exactly. The only drawback I see to h3 is that the normal move would be go knight f6 back, right? And then you have some pressure on e4 again.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the knight is actually that well placed on g4. It was more or less just a resource to trade the bishops off and get the queen into the game. So I don't think White has to play h3 here. I think I would maybe prefer a developing move.
I'm struggling to find a good developing move though, like maybe bishop. Do I want him on e2? I still don't like c4. I don't really like b5. But on e2 he's not doing anything either.
I mean, on e2 he's maybe sometimes you maybe sometimes have like a some tactics where the bishop is indirectly hitting the knight. Like let's say bishop e2. Maybe you're gonna have the pawn break in the center in some lines with going d5, and then going knight d4 later, and then with tempo because the bishop's now hitting the knight. It's just something that might be worth considering.
With the bishop on e2, if I decide to open the e file after castling, I maybe have the option to go back in time and take your queen with the bishop in the future. It's another thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, that is probably true. So with bishop e2 certainly opens up a lot of positions where you can break in the center. I already like maybe I shouldn't have given this to you, but yeah, the way to achieve this would obviously be with d5, right? White can eventually play d5, and if black wants to move his knight, you can take on e. But it's gonna open up the position. Another normal move in this position is actually going bishop d3, and the reason. And it leads to a little bit of a different structure later. More or less, the idea behind bishop d3 would be to maybe go for the pawn chain structure where you push e5 later, and then the bishop's hitting h7. And the second,
that's assuming you castle short.
That is assuming I castle short. That being said, it also highlights the bad position of the knight on g4, as after bishop d3,
okay.
bishop d3, e5. The knight doesn't have any great squares at all. And after something like h3 then to kick it, it might have to drop back to h6 where it really doesn't want to be.
But that would still be true if I went to bishop e2 instead of d3. I could go e5 and make your knight sad.
That is also true. That is also true.
I much prefer getting the bishop on the e file, I think, so that I can maybe castle short and then break in the center and get some attack going.
Yeah, but plus it keeps you it gives you more options basically, which is why I like this move. You can still go for you can still go for either the e5 structure or the d5 structure. And black still is in a weird spot as well, depending on how he wants to keep developing. So yeah. I think for the sake of keeping this going, I think I'm just gonna castle long.
What do you think about the relative peace value, by the way? If I were to castle short now, would knight f2 really be a threat, or would you be losing an exchange by taking a rook with a knight? Especially in a position like this where the rooks aren't doing anything.
You mean castle long, right?
Yeah, if I castle long and you play knight f2, are you winning something, or are you losing something by getting the exchange?
I mean, like the first thing is, in general, I don't think the exchange is worth a lot in this game, simply because rooks don't really participate anyway. But the issue with long castles here wouldn't be losing the exchange to the fork. The issue would be losing the f2 pawn and giving up a lot of control. Like in particular, after long castles, knight takes f2, your e3 square is insanely weak because there's no priest protecting this. And this can really be an issue in a lot of. I think like the square disadvantage is worth more than some of the material gained or lost in that case.
So it's just positionally terrible, rather than losing an exchange.
Yeah. Black might still take the exchange, but either way, there's no need to do this. Plus, you're not gaining anything out of it, probably.
Sure. So with that in mind, I kind of just like h3. I'm still flexible with my own castling rights, and I'm kicking away one of your pieces from my half of the board. I don't see anything else particularly useful I could do. I'm thinking about d5, but it looks a little bit too early. I maybe want to get my king out the center first.
Yeah, like now that black is castled, you probably don't want to be the first one to break in the center. Breaking in the center is usually something the side plays for that already castled, because the other person is still in the center. Plus, your king is going to be longer in the center, even in the past. So this is probably not the moment you want to play for a pawn break.
At least for the next 6-7 moves.
Exactly.
So H3 is definitely my favorite move.
H3 is a candidate move.
I don't see many other candidate moves. I don't know what else I'd want to do as white.
I think another idea could be to go e5 now, to maybe prepare h3 to kick the knight later. Now with the bishop on d2, the knight is probably not that sad on h6 because it can go to f5 later once the e pawn pushed. But it's a little bit of a more committal move. Let's put it that way. You're basically committing to pawn structure at that point. But you can also play h3. The knight's probably gonna drop back to f6 then.
I think whenever I push something in the center, it's going to be the d pawn. It just looks sharper, like I win more stuff eventually. I'd rather push d5 than e5 in most of the lines that I can see.
Okay.
I'm just going to go with this because it still feels right.
Alright, that's very fair. So I think knight s6 is the only sensible move here. You could also go knight. Black could also go knight h6 here, maybe anticipating e5 later to get a square. But either way, this is probably the natural move. Again, there's no sacrifices on f2 probably. It's a little bit too early. The black pieces have the most squares covered here, and I think this is just a normal move. For sure.
The main reason I did that is because I want a castle. So should I do that immediately? I wonder.
Black can castle now for sure. I think I slightly prefer kingside to queenside here, because
I would in 2D chess.
Yeah.
Just always opposite sides.
Because you like decisive results.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
I like fireworks.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to evaluate the long-term consequences of this, but I think either moves are fine. If you wanna play a sharp game, you're probably gonna cast short. I don't think you should.
Enough said.
I think d5 wasn't that great here because black has already castled and the white king's gonna be in the center. As it stands now, it's gonna be a question of who gets to attack first, which is cool.
So something I'm thinking is that because you've got a knight on c6 in the moves after you've castled, if I were to play d5, pawn takes, knight takes, I wouldn't be threatening bishop takes, queen in the past, attacking your king because you've already castled, and it just creates an alternative timeline for no reason. I'd really like to take your queen in the past with check.
The queen can never get captured with check now because the king already castled and the pawn is still standing. The pawn's still standing on e6. Yeah. So you would have to remove the pawn from e6 first to ever capture the queen in the past, which then would put me in check because I already castled. If that answers the question.
Sure,
yeah. Okay, let me just make a move here and then talk about this again. The reason why black also was able to castle long here is because queen a4 is actually covered, like h7 in the line is covered by the knight. If the knight was not standing on f6 to cover h7, the queen could then basically what happens in this game is if the queen hits a pawn, it's more or less hitting it twice because it's gonna hit it now and in the pass later. So you really want to make sure that you already got your pawns protected if you anticipate a queen move to attack that piece.
That makes sense. I don't think that went through my mind yet. Just attacking any pawn is doing more damage than it should.
Exactly. I think it's mostly the queen that does this, but I think it's a good rule of thumb that if the queen's hitting a pawn and you can't kick it from the square, it's going to attack the pawn twice later.
So I guess the idea is that triagonals and quadrigonals are weaker because they contain diagonals. So it's like two lines that you're attacking.
Yeah, I think
the more dimensions you're attacking along, the weaker it is.
Exactly. Also, like the further you actually travel back, the weaker the board becomes to defend.
Because you have more time to attack, right?
Exactly. Plus, the other pieces from the main timeline are gonna have a more difficult time actually intervening there. Like, Like for example, if you take a pawn and only go back one move, the pawn's actually covering itself, etc., etc.
Okay, I'm thinking about queen a4. I don't know what it does. After something like a5?
Yeah, like like what? Sorry, come again?
Queen a4? Does that do anything?
Well, you tell me. What do you think? What's your idea?
It's just stopping your c6 knight from going anywhere, but even if I were to take a7 in the extreme case, I'm not doing anything there.
Okay, let's maybe ask the other way around. What do you think Black wants to do?
Because of h6, I feel like g5 is on the way, but White also wants to pawn storm on the other side.
Exactly.
So you want g5, and I think I want something like b4 or a4.
Yeah, probably. It's probably a better attacking idea than going with the queen right away, because you mentioned that it pins the knight from moving, but I think Black doesn't want to move the knight anyway. I think Black wants, like you said, play g5, g4 maybe as a long-term option to try and attack White's king on the king's side. So I don't like queen a4 as much. The only idea I could see is maybe following up queen a4 with bishop a6, trying to remove a defender near the king.
Yeah. A bit like what's it called, the King's Indian? With that idea on the other side of the board.
I don't think there's a King's Indian, but yeah, I mean, like...
Oh, that bishop idea, I mean.
Yeah, like contesting the piece next to the king. But yeah, like in normal terms, I feel like pushing either the A or B pawn are more normal, but there might be some concrete ideas with queen a4 as well.
I feel like I want to just play a4, a5 maybe.
So sort of a similar
knight
idea.
takes, just rook takes.
Yeah, that's certainly an idea. But Black probably has to react to that at some point then.
b4 sorry, looks good, but a little bit slower. I'm still threatening b5 so I can play a4 later, but that takes a couple more moves.
Yeah, I mean, b4 grabs more space. It grabs more space in the center on c5 and a5. You might also be later looking to push b5 to then kick the knight and go queen a4 then, as it becomes a lot more potent. But yeah, so I think we covered most of the attacking idea White has here for now. So I feel like now it's up to you to decide which idea you want to go for.
I'll go with this one and try and keep it a little bit sharper.
Right, so...
and I think now I just want to play a5 and trade stuff.
So, I think to a4, Black probably doesn't have to react to immediately. I think Black has time here to play g5, maybe. But yeah, like you said, this is getting very sharp, which is bad news for me because it's gonna make it harder to try and explain. But yeah, another thing Black could do here is play a5 to shut this down. As before probably runs into pawn takes, knight takes. It is not as clear though. For the sake of playing the more sharp line though, I think I'll go g5 here.
So should I go for a5 immediately? Is the question.
Should you go for a4 immediately? Let me see. What are your candidates here?
Knight takes, rook takes, pawn takes, queen a4.
Sorry, come again?
And I don't see how it can be defended.
Come again?
a5, knight takes a5, rook takes a5, pawn takes a5, queen a4, and I don't see a way to defend that pawn.
Is that the first line though?
That's what I'm seeing. Sorry?
Is that a forced line though?
What else is my pawn doing? Not much.
No, I mean, is that a forced line for what Black can play?
You could also take with pawn. I just kind of want to weaken your pawns around your king, just like I would do in 2D chess.
Okay, but what if Black doesn't take the pawn?
Black doesn't take the pawn. I think I just want to take b6, but that kind of looks maybe slow.
Yeah, because
you've got so much defense on a8, like just around your king.
It's not an immediate threat, but it's going to be long-term weakening for sure. Other options we have that, like in a classical game, like b4 could be an idea as well to try and prepare
b4
this.
is my second option, yeah. Just so that A5 is a little bit more scary for black, I guess.
Yeah, a5 certainly looks like it asks black a question, but I don't think black actually wants to take that pawn because like you said, if knight takes pawn, white is probably always going to sack the exchange there, and it's going to be very happy with after pawn takes. It also means the bishop is open in that line, so maybe there could be some queen b3 ideas, and then maybe pinning the bishop with bishop a6 as well.
Right. Okay.
Just going forward. So after a5, black probably doesn't want to take. So I think what black wants instead is having white take on b6, and if white plays a6, it's just gonna drop the bishop back, and I don't think that's what white really wants.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what do you think black does after a5?
After a5, g4 looks tempting for black.
Yeah, that's certainly the normal
Maybe-
move. That's certainly the normal move.
Either g4 or h5 preparing them. Because black's attack on the king side just looks faster than white's on the queen side.
I would slowly tend to agree with this, because it's not immediately clear to me how fast white can actually attack black, and the main reason is that the fianchetto structure just usually tends to be somewhat safer than not
it
having
feels
this.
really strong. It feels really hard to break through.
Exactly. So you kind of have to make a choice here. If you want to run the risk of attacking yourself and maybe getting overrun, or if you want to maybe shift your attention.
So what would be the defensive option? There's not much I can do to prevent one of the kingside files from being open.
I see a couple of ideas you can maybe play here.
Something that comes to mind is moving the knight, either e1 or e5, so that I'm defending g4 with the bishop, but that doesn't look good either. Because I'll always end up having to move the h-pawn anyway. There's also g4, but then look at my king.
G4 could be a move here, but it weakens a certain other. It weakens the diagonal a lot, especially for the
just
bishop
weakens
later on
everything, doesn't
b7.
it?
Yeah, it's just a weakening move in general, right? And after something like h5, I don't really think white got his money's worth out of making a defensive move. That being said. There's still a couple of things white could try here. Mainly it could go. Mainly you could maybe go for some sort of active reply by going something like knight e5 here. Is what I'm looking at, and it's sort of an active defense. After pawn push, the bishop is also covering g4. Plus, it also threatens the knight on c6, which is covering the queen side. So after the knight gets traded, maybe a5 becomes more potent. And it also, as a third threat, maybe threatens to take the queen in the past. So this is maybe a move, a multi-function move.
But because of how slow I feel white's attack is, I don't think taking the queen with check is fast enough. It just catches up with the peasant, and then I'm not doing anything in the second timeline, right?
Yeah, probably not.
Because we just go one move back, and it's the same position but without a knight there when it catches up.
Yeah, that's true. It's just something else to keep in mind.
Whenever
Whenever you're looking for time travel moves, looking for the ones that can take a queen with check certainly looks appealing. But yeah, the main idea would be here to maybe threaten a knight on c6 and also covering g4. Like you went from covering g4 once to covering g4 3 times in one move.
Yeah, I do like this move now that I see it on the board. Let's
Alright, I would tend to agree. I think this is probably one of the better moves, but I certainly like it more than a5 because I feel like black's probably actually quicker with g4 in that line. As it stands now, I feel like black probably should take this. Black probably should take this because I don't feel like he wants him to take. It's either gonna be this or play g4 anyway.
And if you take g4 is kind of more scary. I feel like if you take on e5, then I again have to worry about you playing g4 on the next move.
So come again, in which line?
If knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, g4 looks kind of scary.
But you
Like,
can take the knight on...
after you do something.
You can take the knight on f6 though, with your pawn.
Yeah, that's true, and then you'd have to move into a different square.
Yeah,
g4 still looks kind of scary though.
yeah, like, G4
immediately.
G4 immediately is probably the way to go here. Or taking the knight and then playing a little bit more conservative. And I like this move though because even after the knight moves, you still got e4 protected twice, which is important here.
So how do I prevent a file from being opened? G or H?
You probably can't. You probably can't. But this gives you more time to attack though. Because you can at least remove the knight. So like overall, I think I still like this move more than going a5 immediately. But yeah, I think black still goes g4 here, right? To after the capture, maybe get a look into the game.
Like a move, yeah.
It looks fairly normal to me. The only other thing I'm looking at is just taking and play a little bit more conservatively. But the problem is after pawn takes, the knight on f6 doesn't really have any great squares because the g and h, like g4, h5 are both covered by the light squared bishop, who also activated with this knight move. It does ruin white's pawn structure a little bit if you take here, but overall I think black prefers to let white take maybe if he wants to follow through with this idea. So I think black goes g4 here anyway.
So after knight takes pawn, maybe knight takes knight, bishop takes knight, am I supposed to be scared about something like queen g5?
So you wanna take the pawn with the knight?
That would be my first thought, at least in 2D chess. So that I'm just not opening my own G or H file.
Well, what could black reply in that case?
One of the rooks on G8 would look scary. Maybe not that scary though. I'm not sure. I feel like black just really wants to rip open either the G file or the H file.
So first things first though, what do you think is going to happen if you don't react to the pawn and play and start going through with your own attacking ideas like going a5?
Then you're going to take my H pawn and open things up?
Probably. Okay, so you're probably going to have to react to that, right?
Yeah, which either means pushing h4 or taking with knight.
You could also include a check first.
Well, knight takes queen and knight takes knight those are both check. But they're also both knight moves, which means I'm not attacking g4 with two pieces, and I'd have to open the h file to get rid of the pawn.
So I would probably say that your first assessment was correct. I think the normal move here is to take g4 with the knight. The only other idea I could see is going h4 here to.
Yeah, that looks a little bit more weakening than knight takes, I think. Or
yeah,
I feel
probably true. But yeah, I think you more or less already got the gist of this one.
And I assume knight takes is way better than bishop takes. It feels that way.
Yeah, I would probably agree with this. Bishop takes looks a little bit loosening because then black can probably actually take the knight on e5 and then follow up with knight takes bishop, and then pawn takes would be forced. Which looks bad. Which looks bad for sure.
The knight on e5 is just a tactical target in that line, so yeah. I'll go with this.
Yeah, I think I slightly prefer this to bishop takes. So in this line you were highlighting rook g8. It certainly looks like the normal move. I mean, first of all, which rook would you take here?
D rook.
Yeah.
Just getting him on the open file while he's doing something.
Exactly. Black probably doesn't want to push d5 here anymore because the play is not going to be in the center. The play is going to be either on the king side where black's looking to attack or on the queen side where white's looking to attack. So it's probably going to be the rook to g file. I do think it's probably better though to trade the knight first. Mainly because mainly because
maybe you want to take the bishop with the rook.
Exactly. It seems a little bit more flexible. After going rook
I have
g1,
to take with bishop, so.
Yeah. But, like bishop takes more or less fast. I think if you do pawn takes, I think queen h4 is gonna hit, and it's gonna be very hard to prevent h2 checkmate later with time travel. So I do think this makes a lot of sense. I do think this makes a lot of sense.
It's normal in 2D as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, most of these moves have been fairly normal 2D moves, while also keeping in mind some of the threats though that can arise from the 5D, which is how I currently feel like is probably going to be the way to go. How to approach this? Okay, so in this position, I'm either going to be playing rook g8 or h5.
They both attack a bishop. They both make me do basically the same thing.
Exactly. Which is going to be what?
Good question. Either bishop f3 or e2.
Yeah, I think bishop f3 looks a little bit more sane. Because after something, first things first. I think I prefer rook g8 here, because it puts another piece on the attack versus h5 just threatening to win material, which could also be scary. But in that case, maybe in some lines, white can actually defend this. What can they? Or maybe straight up ignore this, you know, with some active ideas. So
I'm still looking at a5. It looks so juicy.
For a5, still intending taking on b6.
a5, maybe d5 to get rid of the knight. But at the same time, I really don't want to let you take my bishop and open the h file.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say I don't think white has time for this. I think after a5, black would immediately take the bishop with his rook. And then d5 to kick the knight is too slow, because black can probably even stack on g2 in that line. That looks very scary. So I think white probably has to react to this threat at the moment.
I think my favorite move in the position is bishop f3.
What are alternatives though? There's one move here that I think is a little bit difficult to see. That also helps white though.
I don't see anything good other than saving the bishop. And if it's another bishop move, you know, f3 is the only place I see.
There's one more move I wanted to see though, to perhaps protect the bishop.
Protect the bishop? If I protect the bishop with something you want to take with rook anyway, don't you?
Yeah, unless you play queen d1 here. If you play queen d1, I probably don't want to take the bishop because the queen's gonna recapture.
I don't think I understand.
If you play,
I just feel like the bishop's more valuable than the rook here.
That is true, but I think we're talking about like the earlier positions. I think like the longer the game goes on, the value shifts a little bit, and the reason why I think queen d1 could be an idea here is because first of all, I think white is an immediate problem. I think bishop e2 is too slow because the rook can be taken, and bishop f3 also, like, it looks normal, but I think the reason why I think queen d1 is worth considering here is after rook takes, queen takes, the queen's controlling the g file, and it's not.
That's true.
It's not clear
how
black.
You're only 2 moves away from controlling it back.
Exactly. Like it's not clear to me how black can actually reclaim the g file here, which is like black's best vector of attacking. It also would activate the queen, as on c2 it's not really doing much at the moment. Like the protection of e4 is not really necessary. the only question is there an immediate drawback? The immediate drawback, of course, being if black can still push h5.
I mean, if black can still push h5, I want to have my bishop on f3 anyway. In which case, I think maybe queen d1 would be a waste of tempo. Maybe.
Yeah, that's supposed to. But keep in mind, h5 would be hanging. So after queen d1, h5, you could take the pawn. The question is, does black have a sacrifice there on like g2, for example, right?
I still just feel like bishops are stronger, so you want to trade rooks for bishops. I'm not seeing the counterplay that I get for it.
I mean,
beyond controlling the g file for a couple of moves.
Exactly. The counterplay would be you controlling the g file, which is black's only vector of attack. So and after you control the side of the board where black's attacking, you can then start working on your own ideas, which are still coming, which would be b4, a5, etc., etc. So that would be the counterplay there.
See what you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would more or less be the idea here. If black chooses to take.
But after rook takes, queen takes, I feel like my queen's just on the wrong side of the board again. I'd like to be at least looking at the queen side if I want to attack soon. Maybe I'm just rushing.
You still got some attacking ideas though. It's just a little bit of a dynamic shift in that case. So I'm gonna tell you right now. If white plays queen d1 here, I won't take the bishop, and I'll explain you why in a moment.
Maybe white's attack is just... I'll make the move, but maybe white's attack's at least caught up to the speed of black. If you take.
So after takes, the queen's on g5, g4. If black makes nothing moves there, like I don't know, let's say first white to move again. What would be your attacking idea?
Queen g7 looks kind of nice, but you can just defend everything.
True, but there's where the time travel aspect comes into play a little bit.
Well, I see. I'd forgotten that existed.
Yeah, so it is very scary to allow a queen into your camp in this game. Mainly in this position, after rook takes, queen takes. If black does a nothing move like a6 or something, queen g7 is very dangerous because it actually there's actually no defense for black to from white covering the rook in the past. It would actually be too slow. So if black,
am I attacking though?
The rook on h8.
On which board, I mean?
On the same board after you played queen g7.
And then you defend the rook in the current timeline with maybe the queen?
Exactly, but then you could jump back to the board where your queen is on g4 and move to g7. You could take the rook on h8.
Okay.
Can you follow me?
I think so, yeah.
So rook takes bishop, queen takes nothing move like h6, and then queen g7. If the rook then moves out the way to defend in the main timeline, the white queens can then travel back to the board where the rook was still standing on h8 unprotected, and your queen just moved to g7. That is what I'm looking at, and probably the reason why I won't take the bishop here. I
think I see that. It took me a minute.
Come again?
I think I see what you mean. It took me a minute.
Yeah. It's sometimes easy to forget that these aspects still exist. But I think in general, this is a good way to maybe shift the attack dynamically to the other side of the board, where black's trying to attack more or less without hindering your own attacking chances. And keep in mind, no matter what happens in all of these lines, you always control the center. So the two pieces for black on c6 and b7 are not really contributing in the attack right now. It's not clear how to activate them. That being said, we're still
they're really good defenders.
That being said, we're still going to try, of course. We are still going to try, of course.
Yeah, queenside minor pieces are doing a really good job of making it hard to attack your king.
Yeah, which is also why you always want to put your king to the side of the board where there's most of your pieces.
So more reliance on defense than in 2D.
Yeah. Like the defense is a lot more difficult, simply because like singular minor piece sacrifices are so much easier to actually pull off.
Yeah.
Like all of the attacking ideas are basically accelerated. Mostly, as we went through earlier, the queen just being able to attack twice with one move, more or less.
If bishop takes pawn, can you sack a rook and then play queen g5?
You tell me.
I don't want to calculate that. Looks awful.
But you have to. You have to calculate these.
Bishop takes pawn, rook takes pawn, check. Do I have to take with king though?
I mean,
then if queen g5, you're attacking. The bishop's not in the way because you've spent a move sacking the rook in the first place. I think that would be mating.
So your question is, after bishop takes, then rook takes, king takes, is queen g5 mate? That's your question, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's mate.
Feeling is one thing, but you still gotta calculate. Let's say it wasn't mate. What could you play?
I'm not sure. I would have maybe queen g4 as a resource, but then you can just take and you've opened a file like you wanted to do all along.
What else? What else though? Queen g4 would be the normal attacking move, defensive move. But that's another issue.
G3 closes the open line, but not the triagonal. Like you're still attacking my king in the past after G3, aren't you?
G3 is not on the board anymore. The rook captured it.
Oh yeah.
So what I was getting at is after queen g5, queen g4, the knight's actually hanging on d2 as well.
That's true, but how can you get at the knight?
I mean, the queen's hitting it from g5.
Oh yeah.
so that's one more thing to consider. Okay, but first give me a moment. I wanna actually calculate now if that would have been checkmate either way. So bishop takes, rook takes, king takes. We would be 2 boards up. Then queen's gonna check, and it's gonna be after the king took. So I don't think it would be checkmate immediately. I think the first the queen could go is
soon.
Yeah, I don't think it should be checkmate immediately. I think the queen would still be in time to block. But that being said, there's also a third issue why that's no good. Is even if the queen doesn't take the knight, the bishop's now hanging on h5 as the queen is pinned to the king. So like checkmate or not, I don't think you wanna take the h pawn here.
Checkmate a lot. It looks terrifying. I still really like bishop f3, but then why did I play queen d1?
First of all, it also cost black a move to play h5. Plus, gave you the option maybe for some active counterplay. If you were to play bishop f3 now, it looks like the normal option for certain. And I don't think the inclusion of h5 and queen d1 don't matter as much. I think the queen's more or less doing the same on d1 as well as c2. So yeah, it's questionable like how good this actually was. But yeah,
I guess it's the value of putting a queen back on the original square versus pushing h5 to kick a bishop.
Yeah, more or less. But also, like, keep in mind these are not like calculating all these lines. Calculating all these lines in advance, as well as actually giving the defensive resources of queen g4 on some of these. And it's not entirely clear what the h pawn is actually doing here. So I don't think it was bad for white per se.
I'll go with this because now I'm maybe threatening e5 with some threats of removing your king's defenders.
5 threatening the knight. Keep in mind the bishop's also your best king defender currently, though.
True.
So maybe go easy on this. I'm starting to feel like black is getting somewhere though, because I think this can be a good attacking idea now. So I'm just gonna put it on the board, and we can figure it out in a moment together.
What's that attacking then? You want to just win a pawn?
Which pawn do I want to win?
H3.
Is that an issue?
It looks like it would be in 2D chess, so probably yes.
So it's probably 10 times more an issue in 5D chess.
Yeah.
Mainly because after queen takes h3, point being, of course, the pawn can't recapture because it's pinned.
Yep.
And next up might be some time travel moves to h2 to checkmate. 2D ideas. 2D ideas would be perhaps going rook takes g2, bishop takes g2, rook g8, hitting the bishop again. However, in that line, you actually see the advantage of queen d1, because black is still in time to play queen f3, then defending g2 again.
Yeah, that's true. They really don't like being on the defensive there, though.
I mean, nobody does. But there's kind of the cost of business if you if you play opposite sides castles.
But is there another way to defend h3? It doesn't look like it. I could play king h2, but that seems kind of risky.
What's the issue with king h2?
I'm assuming that means there is an issue.
Yes.
King h2. What do you have? I just don't like having to play king h2 in the first place, to be honest.
It's made in 2.
Mate in 2. You can go... Can you go backwards somewhere? Mate in 2.
It's 2 forcing moves on the main timeline that don't involve time travel.
I don't see a mate in 2. I don't see an immediate checkmate at all.
Right. What would be what are your weak squares on the king side?
All of them.
Oh, but some are weaker than others.
h3 feels extremely weak now. My bishop's defending g2 for now.
Hmm?
I feel like h3 is my weakest square, which is kind of defended by king h2.
So what about the next column though?
I don't see it.
Okay, so that's all right. So after king h2, black would play rook takes g2 check. And no matter how white recaptures here, there's gonna be queen f4 checkmate. Because it's gonna check the king in the past on the board where he just moved to g2, to h2.
Ouch. Yeah, I see.
So the weak square I'm trying to highlight here is f4, as it's an open diagonal to your king.
Yeah.
So I think after king h2 rook takes, white black could play queen check immediately, but it wouldn't be mate immediately because white can still play g3.
Yeah, because of g3.
So the more accurate way
sack a rook is to gain that move so that the g3 square is open in the diagonal.
Plus the king can never move back from the past position. So I think after king h2 rook takes
I feel like
g2,
I should have seen that.
No, that's all right. You have to. It's a little bit tricky, but that's why I like to highlight weak squares
Sure.
more so than anything else here. But I mean, that's what we're here for, right?
I kind of just feel like I'm screwed then. Like, what can I possibly do? Like, can't defend h3 with anything?
So again, the immediate threat black has here is taking on h3. So you would need something drastic here. You would need something drastic here. And looking at this now, I would maybe tend to agree that there is not a great defense, unless I am missing something myself.
So should white go for balls out attack and try and get some counterplay before you can get queen h2 mate?
There's probably the way to go here. I'm just looking at it again. So the problem is queen takes h3. Threatening h2 very soon. Black can't play g3 because it's hanging to the rook. Also like again h3 is just hanging. You can't move your king as we just went over. Like king h1 maybe holds on for the moment.
King h1 looks really slow.
It looks slow, but it might not lose immediately. But yeah, like either way, it's probably not right what we wanted out of this position. And in this case, so let's say let's say you don't see a way out of this position. What would be your next step?
I don't see a way to defend this corner. I kind of want to attack in the other corner with, again, either b4 or a5 or d5. But that looks a lot slower than what black's doing to my king.
Yeah, I would agree. So at this point the queen side threats are more or less dead. So what else is there though?
What else is there beyond attacking the queen side and defending the king side? It doesn't seem to leave me with many options.
But what are your limited options then? Talking about 5D aspects now. Because I would tend to agree. I would tend to agree. Probably screwed on this timeline. But that doesn't mean the game's over.
I feel like there's never been anything good I can do by moving back in time. There's a hanging knight, but that's only like 3 moves ago. So it just catches up and then I'm screwed again.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that can move back particularly far, is there?
True.
There's a bishop that can take an f7 at some point, but that's not doing much.
True. So, you don't take your time to have options from the current board. But what if you were to set up a better jump from next move?
What's attacking what? This bishop's going here. I'm looking at the bishop and the queen, like those are the only 2 pieces that I think should be jumping back in time, if at all.
I have an idea here in mind, which is why I ask you this. So bishop and queen. What jumps could you be setting up?
I'm not seeing much with the queen.
Even from a position where you moved?
Yeah, I'm looking at the green squares. I'm trying to see like 1 square ahead.
I'm not talking about jumps from the current board. I'm talking about jumps that you want to set up now. Basically,
I'm looking for weak squares in your past, is what you mean.
Yes, and also for empty squares in the past. Because keep in mind, the next move black wants to play is not a forcing move. Black wants to play queen takes h3. So one idea that white could have here, that I would be looking at, is going queen b3 maybe.
I was looking at queen g7 so I can attack this rook all the way back. I guess that doesn't do anything though.
Queen where?
g7 because that square's been free for a long time.
g7, but how do you get to g7?
Like, if I ever get to g7, that looks like I can go really far back and do some stuff. If that's ever possible.
Okay, yeah.
From b3, it looks like she's doing less. She's maybe looking at b6 at some point.
The idea would be queen b3 and then go all the way back, like all the way back to move 1.
To see, just keep on b3 but go all the way back.
Exactly. That would be probably the best shot White has here, in my opinion. Because as we went over, I don't feel like White can survive the attack on the spot. And
Sure, I just need to.
looking at time travel jumps, as we went over, I don't think White has immediate counterplay ideas. You know, like going to one of the middle game boards. So the next thing I would be looking at is looking at empty squares on the earlier boards, and then just run it all the way back. To then maybe later set up a capture from the queen on h5, h4. Would be my idea. I would be looking at currently.
Board 1 does look like the best board, doesn't it, if I want to go back at all?
It sort of does, and it is not clear how easy it is to actually win, to actually survive or win with that many moves. If you have an extra queen.
A few number of moves.
Excuse me, come again?
We have played quite a lot of moves.
Exactly.
So if I start a new timeline back at the beginning, I haven't until we catch up to.
It is a lot of moves, and that is probably why I would say that this is the best option.
But that also allows
the
you
best
to create
idea.
another timeline and screw me at some point.
It is also it is probably not a good sign when you have to try and set up for this.
Yeah.
But it is maybe the best practical try.
So I'm sort of having to give up a timeline, essentially. I'm giving something up, but it's something that's not in 2D chess.
Exactly, because it's more or less trying to reset, and probably the best chance is going as fast as possible with the strongest piece that you have, and then like as a long-term plan, maybe to set up an attack against the queen on h4 from the parallel timelines in the 18 moves you have to catch up to the board. And
you've been counting.
And that should it tells you on the bottom actually if you zoom in.
Oh.
It says like T18.
Oh yeah, I didn't notice that. Cool.
Yeah, and White probably would have a decent chance to accomplish this because it's up a queen on the second board and wants to get something to h4 basically.
Do I want to sack a queen on f7 on move 2 on the second timeline? I'm gonna submit.
Could be an idea for sure. But first of all, I want you to resume to the position we have on the board now, and what you think Black should play.
I think Black doesn't want to go back in time until White does. So in the present, taking on h3 looks really natural. It's not threatening anything immediate as far as I can see, though, apart from just taking on g2, like you said.
There's one
just building up a massive attack that works somehow.
There's one idea Black has that you have to keep in mind, and that is trying to play against the time travel that's coming up from White.
What can you do on move 19 that does something against something I do on move 1, though? I'm not sure I follow.
The ideas. So let's say Black plays a normal move here and takes on h3, right?
Right. Then I go back as we
White's gonna turn it back to move 1 and plays up a queen. So is this something Black wants?
No, but I guess you could think about doing something similar with your own timeline.
Exactly. That would be one thing. Like for example, going queen h4, queen f4, for example, to set up a jump myself to an empty square to go back to move 1 or 2. That is one idea Black could be doing if he doesn't want to play in the new timeline, and he probably doesn't because it's very far back and he feels like he's winning on the spot. But another idea is preventing the jump altogether, and that would be this move right here.
That prevents the jump by one move.
Does it?
What am I missing?
But does it?
So after... Well, bishop takes is the obvious move. And then what do you have? This seems like a no-brainer, but then what? Queen f4's too slow now. Queen g5 isn't a threat, is it? Because my pawn's always been on g2 in the past.
You can put this on the board. I don't think there's something better for white.
We'll just go with it then.
Exactly. And now
what am I missing?
And now you will see.
Okay. So if I were to try and go back now, what happens? Oh, I'm blocked by my own queen, I see.
Exactly.
So you're...
So the idea is to prevent the time travel. Black
You're
can
blocking in 3D.
Exactly. Is putting the other party in check, so that then next move the queen is actually blocking itself. So it can't go to the first to move one again. So this little maneuver, black basically prevented this whole idea of running it back to move one.
So if I were to go queen, what, b5, trying to do the same thing, I guess you just sack another rook, and then that wouldn't work either.
Probably. Probably. Like also like this has the added effect that that black's like starting to get somewhere as well, because after the next capture the king would have to take, and that is probably gonna
I'm screwed.
That's probably gonna be pretty scary.
It looks really sad, but knight f3. I'm allowing you to take h3. I'm allowing you to take the bishop on g2. It looks awful.
I think here's where it gets it's gonna get increasingly hard for white to make a move. I think
It doesn't feel like it can get a lot harder.
My intuition is telling me that this is probably drawing to its conclusion at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because the moves seem to be pretty forcing.
I can't defend the g2 bishop.
Yeah.
Which means I can't stop you from forcing open the g file, making me move my king.
Knight f3. I think knight f3 runs into queen h3. And again, there's no
Either queen h3 or rook takes bishop.
Yeah.
Both look awful.
Yeah, rook takes bishop doesn't look like a killer immediately, because the knight is actually covering g5. Yeah. But yeah.
That's the main reason I want to play knight f3, but yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see a different way to defend h3 other than maybe, what, c4? I'm defending d4, which is the queen.
d4 is actually an interesting resource.
It's still giving up a pawn.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much no matter what, this is probably not going to end well. c4 is a nice move to spot to actually protect h3. And maybe like after rook takes, king takes, you have some queen protection in some lines. But yeah, I think in this position it probably fails to knight takes d4. Also looking at e2. So yeah. I think white is a little bit running out of moves here. Probably.
I think even in 2D, I would think about resigning in this position.
I think in 2D.
Because I don't see a good way to defend h3 with all this stuff coming.
I think in 2D there's maybe still some tricks. Maybe still some tricks, but yeah, it's gonna be increasingly hard. I think in 2D you might still get away with c4, followed by knight takes, and then like
c4. I don't think anything's good, but this maybe looks the least bad.
I would agree, and I think we both agree that probably knight takes look the most natural here. So I'm just gonna put this on the board. Yeah, like I said, it's probably gonna get increasingly difficult. This does open you up to some later time travels, maybe. Now that the c pawn is not blocking the queen, but not at the moment probably.
I'm looking at d3 for time travel. That looks like it goes quite the way back.
Queen d3. Yep, could be an idea. What
Just so I'm maybe looking at d3 in the past somewhere. But then rook takes g2 still looks awful. And queen takes h3.
Rook takes, king takes. What happens then? There's another cool
Something
puzzle.
bad.
That is another cool puzzle.
Ooh, knight e2 mate.
Exactly. Knight. Very nice. Very nice. Knight e2 checking. And after
I
queen
really
takes.
like queen d3 then.
Yeah, and after. Okay, I mean we're gonna see this. I think like again, I think white is probably running out of moves either way. But this can maybe highlight another mechanic. Like in particular, I really like the what this game's been highlighting is the idea of setting up these very long jumps. Like let's say black makes like nothing move here, white can then run it all the way back, all the way back to move one if he wants to, and then try to come up with counterplay. Like this. And in this position, like black probably wants to do the same. Is preventing this, so the queen's now blocking herself in the past.
So I have to just take this, right, with king?
I mean, what are your other moves?
I only have one and then I get mated in 2D. So yeah.
You could technically go to h1, but it probably...
I feel like I end up getting mated in like 3 or 4 moves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like this you're probably also getting mated.
Because after like queen takes h3, I'd have to jump back with my king, and then I'd have 2 kings on that board with all the major pieces looking at him.
So how does black mate here? You tell me.
Queen g5 off the top of my head looks good.
Intending what?
I'm probably not seeing the triagonal properly, but queen g5 looks like a move for black somewhere.
Do you think queen g5 is mate?
Not immediately, but it looks like it mates eventually on this board.
Which piece is blocking the king's check in the past? After queen g5.
I guess eventually it would be the rook or the bishop.
Which one is it?
The rook, because it comes nearer to the present, if that makes sense.
It can't be the rook because the only position the rook is actually standing on g2 is where it's right to move.
No, of course.
So it's going to be the bishop. After queen g5, the queen could travel back on the same board to g4. Then
but in the future, you might be attacking me on the current board in what, 3 moves time?
Exactly. So as soon as the king had to take on g2, that's where it's going to be vulnerable to pass turtle checks. As before, the bishop was always standing on g2. So
I do feel very vulnerable here.
So black needs to stand on g5 for 3 moves. And how does he accomplish this? Like what would white play after queen check?
Queen check, I think queen g3 is forced. And then would the queen be blocking the triagonal as well, maybe? But then you'd have something... What do you have? Well, then you just trade queens and put a knight on e2 anyway, wouldn't you?
I think you have to trade queens. I think after queen g5, queen g3, I think knight e2 is made immediately.
Of course. You don't even have to trade.
So I think there's a bunch of options here, but yeah, I tend to agree. Queen check here is probably the way to start. And this is where white is probably going down. So we went over queen check, over queen blocks, but it runs into knight mate here immediately.
But if queen doesn't block, I get mated in 2 moves time, and there's not much I can do about it.
Exactly, unless you can somehow contest the square after. Like the only defensive idea would be to maybe run the king on the side, and then play queen g3 later to try and contest this. And then knight e2 is not hitting because the king already moved.
We'll try that option because I don't see anything else that doesn't lose immediately.
That is absolutely true. Okay, so king there. I probably would have preferred h1 because I feel like now there's another check coming.
No.
There's another diagonal.
Oh, it's mate in 2. Fuck.
Mate
in 2, right?
It's not. Sorry, what?
Mate in 2 because I can't block g3 on the next move. Shit.
You can. Like after queen f4, you can still play. You can still play queen g3.
That looks awful. Let's see what happens.
It doesn't look great, but I think the easier way to do this is probably just gonna play to play calm move. Because again, this is actually fairly interesting again. There's no. Maybe this is actually the better move, because if the king went to h1 instead, there will probably be bishop takes, e4 checking, and forcing another move. As it stands right now, the queen is still not. The queen is still a decent way away. But there's also a second issue, and that is this right here.
Oh. And now I'm kind of screwed.
I would tend to agree, as is checkmate.
That's mate immediately, okay.
That is mate immediately. The queen here can't travel back far enough. It can only go to the board up here, and it wouldn't shift back to present far enough to actually hold. But yeah, as we said,
that was allowed because my king was so weak in the present.
Exactly, because the rook's hit once and the queen is hitting it the second time. So this game probably went downhill as soon as White had to start making defensive moves.
It kind of felt that way, to be honest.
Yeah, like the shift in tempo. The shift in tempo is often very tough to foresee. But I mean that's what happens a lot in these opposite castling situations, right? You end up in these.
Just in 2D.
Yeah, you end up in these pawn races more or less. That only get accelerated here by the time travel mechanic a little bit. So yeah, it is hard for me, of course, to pinpoint the one move that probably made it go downhill. Mainly because I also suggested a lot of moves for White here. I think as a general rule of thumb is maybe you don't want to castle opposite sides if your opponent has a fianchetto on the side you want to attack on. Maybe that's like a little takeaway I can give here.
Because fianchetto is not having much influence on the long diagonal like it would in 2D chess. It's just being a really good defensive piece to stop me from attacking you, so your attack's just faster.
Exactly. That's probably the one takeaway I would get here, maybe as some sort of insight. Apart from that, I feel we covered a lot of the ideas here, especially when it comes to playing the center, and then later this resource with setting up long jumps and how your opponent can actually play against it.
Yeah. That was a good game. I feel like I've learned at least something, even though I'm exhausted. It's midnight here, so I'm only going to stay another few minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same for me. I think we're in the same time zone, or maybe you're like a little ahead of me. But yeah, either way, thank you so much for joining for this. I certainly had a lot of fun, and
yeah, thanks for having me.
Learned a lot as well from these games, and yeah.
As I said, this is my first game against a human that's knows how to play this game.
Yeah, I mean that's
very instructive. Thank you.
That's really good. Thank you. That was a really good time. I'm sure we can do some more stuff in the future. I've been new to the whole like trying to coach in 5D. I feel like it's a little bit tough because like there's simply some positions that are so hard to evaluate. We don't have the help of engines yet, and
sure.
And yeah, I can't.
I feel like that's coming soon as well, though.
Exactly. I can't tell you everything with 100% confidence, but either way, I hope you had a good time, and
certainly.
And yeah, that was really fun. Thank you.
Yeah.